Okay, so we're going to go over the periodic table of elements, metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. Metals, nonmetals, and metalloids are separated based on where they're located on the periodic table. The zigzag line or staircase is what divides the table. So you see the zigzag line right here. This is what separates the metals from the nonmetals. You need to pick 3 colors, and then on your notes, color the periodic table like you see here to match. So if you pick purple for your metalloids, then make sure you color in your metalloids purple. Metals are on the left-hand side, which is over here, and I colored them blue, so I noted in my notes that they were blue. And then my nonmetals are all over here on the right-hand side, with the exception to hydrogen, and I colored those green. So make sure your colors in your notes match the actual note itself. Some properties of metals are that they are good conductors of heat and electricity. They are very shiny, so they have a luster. They are ductile, a word that you should be familiar with now, means they can be stretched into thin wires. They can be pounded into thin sheets as well, so they are malleable. And a chemical property of metals is that metals will react with water, H2O, and that will cause corrosion. Metals, location-wise, they are 2/3 of all of the elements on the periodic table. They are on the left-hand side of our ladder. The most reactive metal is the lower left, and that is francium. And that is a group 1 element. In terms of whether or not they will gain or lose electrons, metals will lose electrons, and they will form positive ions, which we call cations. Elements that follow uranium are called transuranium elements. What you need to know about this is that every element after uranium is synthetic, so it's man-made. Now, properties of nonmetals, it's almost the exact opposite. They are very poor conductors of heat and electricity. They're not ductile or malleable. Solid nonmetals are very brittle and they'll break easily. So, like, look at sulfur right here. Sulfur will break. It's very brittle. They're very dull. They're not real shiny. And majority of nonmetals are gases. In terms of where nonmetals are located, there are 17 elements that are on the right side of the ladder. So 1/3 of the periodic table is considered to be nonmetals. Of course, we do have one nonmetal that is on the left side of the periodic table, and that would be hydrogen. Our most active is on the upper right-hand side, and that is considered to be fluorine. They will gain and lose electrons. What's going to happen is they will gain, and they form negative ions, which are anions. Properties of metalloids is that they are metal-like. They have properties of both metals and nonmetals. They can be very shiny or they can be dull. They are all solids. They conduct heat and electricity better than a nonmetal, which doesn't conduct it at all, but they're not as great at conducting heat and electricity as metals are. And metalloids are ductile and malleable. Metalloids are located along the ladder. There are 7 of them: B, S, I, G, E, A, S, S, B, T, E, and A, T. AT is a metalloid that some people say is not a metalloid and polonium is. There's a big discussion about it in the science community. For our purposes, you're going to consider AT to be a metalloid. They will lose, gain, or share electrons depending on what it wants to bond to, and it can form either positive or negative ions. So as you can see, metalloids, they don't know how to make up their mind about anything. Sometimes they do this, sometimes they do that. Each metal has its own characteristics, so one metalloid might lose an electron and another metalloid might gain an electron. One metalloid might form a positive ion and one metalloid might form a negative ion.